He's only 21. He's never led a team. My voice cut through the glass walls of the conference room. I wasn't just shocked, I was gutted. My heart felt like it dropped straight to my stomach. Across the table sat Martin, the same CEO who once called me the company's backbone during a board meeting. Now, he could only offer a lifeless shrug. It's just business, Syra. I stared at the gleaming table, trying to control the flush rising up my neck. 13 years. 13 years building the company's largest division from the ground up, from 2 staff in a borrowed office to 5 global branches bringing in most of the firm's revenue. And yet, here I was, being replaced by a boy still clinging to his father's approval just to authorize a budget. Before I go on, comment where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe. I'm Syra. I'm 39. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and left without a word. No one stopped me. Not even HR, who once told me I was her role model for grace under pressure. The elevator ride down from the 28th floor felt endless. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, searching for answers in the eyes of a woman who gave everything to a company that never planned to give back. But what they didn't know was I had already prepared. I saw this coming months ago. It began with small signs, board meeting invites stopped. My celebrated reports were suddenly under review. Then the whispers started. One day, I overheard Martin in the hallway. We'll announce Ryan as senior director at the Q3 meet. Big day for the family. Ryan. His son. Freshly minted MBA. No leadership experience. Just the right bloodline. That night, sleep evaded me. So I powered up my laptop and logged into a system Martin didn't know existed. Because he never realized I was the one who built it. 7 years earlier, I began quietly investing in the vendors, subcontractors, and third-party partners supporting our operations. I established 17 shell companies across logistics, cybersecurity, analytics, hiring, and compliance. On paper, they looked like mid-size independent vendors. In reality, I owned every one of them. And they handled 77% of our external work. Martin thought he controlled the supply chain. He didn't know I owned the pipes. That night, I drafted termination letters for all 17 firms. Our contracts had 30-day opt-out clauses. By 5 a.m., I sent the notices. By 9 a.m., the cracks started forming. Where's the logistics report? Why are servers timing out? Why hasn't recruiting delivered schedules? It was slow at first, like a beam creaking before a collapse. But by midday, panic spread. Leaders scrambled. Analysts were flying blind. Regional operations froze. Then Martin called. Syra, he began, voice tense. Something's wrong with our vendors. 17 just pulled out. Do you know what's going on? I let the silence stretch. Yes, I said calmly. I know exactly what's going on. Papers rustled on his end. We can't afford this. You know what this does to our Q3 close. Oh, I do, I replied. And your investor confidence. Your audit trail. Your client renewals. He dropped the mask. Syra, please. Let's be reasonable. This isn't personal. That was the last straw. You're right, I said. It's not personal. It's just business. Then I hung up. I placed my phone down and stood in my kitchen, watching morning sunlight slide through the blinds. The silence was deep, the kind that only comes after months of quiet pressure finally give way. But my breath was still tight. I hadn't just crippled a firm. I'd finally confronted 13 years of loyalty that had earned me nothing but a dismissal. That day, 34 emails came in. Some confused. Some panicked. A few desperate. The one I remember was from Jenna, the sharpest operations manager I'd ever trained. "Syra, I don't know what's happening. But I want you to know none of us wanted this. You taught me everything. If you ever need me, I'm here." I didn't reply. Because I didn't want revenge, I had wanted recognition. I'd earned my rise. But the moment they handed my future to a legacy hire with a LinkedIn profile and a famous last name, they made their choice. So I made mine. By noon, media inquiries began. I expected them. One of my shell companies had already leaked a report, detailing our withdrawal, outlining conflict of interest, nepotism, and a breach of ethical vendor trust. I wasn't hiding anymore. By evening, I received an invite to an emergency board meeting, labeled Investor Crisis Briefing. Scheduled for 8 a.m. the next day. What they didn't know was, I'd be attending. Through a series of layered trusts, I owned nearly 18% of the firm's preferred shares. I had never revealed it. But this time, I was walking through the front door. At 7:45 the next morning, I arrived at the same office I'd served for over a decade, but this time, no ID badge. I didn't need one. The security guard blinked. "Miss Syra, are you?" "I'm here for the board meeting." He scanned the list. "Yes, ma'am. Floor 32. As the private elevator rose, I caught my reflection in the steel doors. I looked rested. Calm. Ready. Inside the boardroom, heads turned. Martin was seated, flanked by advisors. Ryan was there too, fidgeting nervously in an oversized suit. "What is she doing here?" Martin snapped. I slid a document across the table. "My holdings give me access to this meeting. I own 18% of your Class A shares through consolidated trusts. Shall I read the list of entities aloud?" Silence fell. One board member, Mr. Duran, one of the founders, skimmed the file. His expression changed. "These firms. I've seen these names for years," he murmured. I nodded. "They kept you growing, while protecting you from your blind spots." Martin leaned forward, sweating. "This is unethical. You never disclosed your holdings." "You never asked," I replied. "And legally, I didn't have to, until a conflict emerged. And that happened the day you handed a top role to an unqualified heir over your most experienced leader." Ryan shrank in his chair. I wasn't cruel, just done being gracious to people who only respected silence and submission. The rest of the meeting blurred into legal jargon, shaky projections, and frantic contingency plans. But one truth cut through it all: without the companies I controlled, their operations wouldn't survive the quarter. Suddenly, they were eager to renegotiate. They dangled board seats. Even hinted at the executive title they once denied me. But the window had closed. "I'm not here to be rehired," I said, rising from my seat. "I'm here to make sure the cost of dismissal is fully paid." I looked Martin in the eye. "You taught me one thing: don't take it personally." "So I won't." I turned toward the exit. Then stopped. 77% of your revenue relied on those contracts. Next time, try promoting based on merit, not bloodlines. And with that, I walked out. By the following week, the company's stock plunged 43%. 2 major clients canceled long-term agreements. 3 regional branches shuttered. While they scrambled, I spent that week interviewing talent for my new firm, one I'd lead under my own name, with Jenna as director of operations. The headlines came fast. Key vendor exodus cripples firm. Anonymous investor shakes up boardroom. Stock nosedives following service collapse. Industry chatter followed. Analysts speculated everything from a stealth acquisition to coordinated sabotage. But no one suspected me. Not yet. I remained silent, not out of fear, but strategy. The more they guessed, the more invisible I became. Each morning, I sat in the sun-filled co-working office I'd rented, 2 floors above one of my own company's HQs. The space smelled of fresh coffee and ink. Small, but full of purpose. Jenna arrived promptly at 8 a.m. each day, spreadsheets and questions in hand. Sharp. Loyal. Steady. I made her director on day 1. She hesitated. Are you sure? That's a big leap. I'm not promoting friends, I said. I'm promoting builders. Her expression shifted, like no one had ever said that to her and meant it. That was the real failure of our old world. It trained talent to expect silence, not recognition. By day 3, we'd secured office space. By day 5, we had 3 former clients ready to sign. Are we really doing this? Jenna asked. We're not just doing it, I said. We're doing it better. Across town, Martin was spiraling. A reliable contact told me he had called in crisis consultants and tried to rebuild his vendor network overnight. But relationships aren't built overnight. And trust isn't bought in bulk. One of my shell firms received a frantic bid, triple the prior rate, begging us to return. We declined. No comment necessary. By then, the board was catching on. But they were too slow, too used to systems built for their comfort, not engineered against them. Then the final blow landed. A week after the emergency meeting, a compliance agency launched a formal inquiry into the CEO's appointment of his son. An anonymous ethics report triggered it. What they found: Ryan had approved 3 procurement deals using Martin's credentials, likely intended as shortcuts, but a clear violation of their own governance rules. And violations have consequences. Investor trust evaporated. A key private equity backer pulled out of a funding round. Within 10 days, Martin and Ryan both announced temporary leaves of absence. That same day, I received a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered. Gold-stamped. Inside was a formal apology, drafted by one of the firm's senior legal officers, requesting a private discussion about my potential return. I held the letter for a long moment. It smelled of desperation dressed in formality. Are you going to take the meeting? Jenna asked. No, I replied without hesitation. But what if they offer everything now? Buyout? CEO title? They showed me who they were when they thought I had no power, I said. I'm not building for their approval anymore. I'm building something better, something that doesn't rely on people like them. Because by then, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about changing the rules. That same week, we secured a strategic alliance with a top logistics network. I consolidated all 17 of my former shell firms under a single banner, Orex Partners. A name I chose years ago. It means, of gold. Built quietly. Built to endure. By month's end, we had on board 46 former employees from my old firm, all overlooked, blocked, or underpaid. We didn't just offer them roles, we gave them voice. One afternoon, a nervous new analyst was walking me through her pitch deck. She stumbled halfway through. Sorry, I'm not used to presenting in front of execs. I smiled. I'm not your exec. I'm your partner. Show me your work, I trust it's solid. Her entire demeanor shifted. That was leadership. Not control. Not intimidation. Just space, space for others to rise without fear. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was clarity. It was peace, waking up without bitterness, watching talent grow where it had once been buried. One morning, coffee in hand, I stood on the balcony as my phone buzzed. News alert. Longtime CEO resigns amid crisis, successor to be named. I exhaled, not with vengeance, but with perspective. 3 weeks after Martin's resignation, the company was barely holding together. Their Q4 projections were halved. Internal memos leaked. Governance failures and leadership scandals made it clear, the walls were crumbling. The industry watched in silence. Some with pity. Others with smug satisfaction. But I had already turned the page. Orex Partners launched 2 satellite offices in markets I once fought to enter, only to be told we lacked the reach. We had it now. Reach. Leverage. Vision. Our in-house recruitment platform matched displaced professionals from other sinking firms with roles based on skill, not status. It was smart, fair, and exactly the kind of system my old company never knew how to build. Ironically, we hired a team of data analysts recently let go by that same firm, the one that once denied me a promotion. One of them, Aaron, approached me after our team lunch. I worked on forecasting, he said. We all knew where the strength came from. It was your department. Everyone saw it. Just, no one could say it. I thanked him. But inside, I knew. It was never about who saw, it was about who spoke. Back at my old company, the interim board scrambled. They appointed Margot Vell as acting CEO, a former strategy advisor. Sharp. Precise. Clearly hired to stabilize the wreckage. 2 weeks into her role, she reached out. Her email was short, thoughtful, and respectful. You may choose not to engage, but I'd value a conversation, not as a negotiation, but as a leader seeking understanding. If you agree, name your place and time. I'll come to you. I respected that. We met in a private conference room I often used for onboarding new clients. No handlers. No press. Just 2 women, survivors of the same storm, walking different paths. She opened first. I've reviewed the contracts. The terminations. The silent equity. You built the infrastructure that carried this company for years. I remained silent. I'm not asking you to come back, she continued. But I want you to know, I understand now. Why you did what you did. That moment mattered. She leaned in, asking detailed questions about the infrastructure behind my shell network, how I spotted the vulnerabilities, how I managed risks so precisely without drawing attention. Her tone wasn't accusatory. She was trying to understand, to ensure nothing like it ever unfolded again on her watch. I answered everything cleanly, professionally, honestly. Do you think there's a path to recovery? She asked, not as a rival, but as a steward trying to preserve what was still standing. I paused before replying. Maybe, I said. If you stop promoting based on loyalty and start investing in the people who laid your foundation. Your people weren't the problem. Your priorities were. She nodded once. Understood. We shook hands. When she left, I stood in the silence, surprised by what I felt, closure. This was no longer about dismantling a company. It was about redefining the standard of leadership. 3 days later, I was invited to speak at a private leadership roundtable. The kind of event I was never invited to in my old role. I wasn't anyone's guest or seat filler this time. I was the keynote. I opened with this. Leadership isn't a title. It's not inherited. It doesn't come with your last name. It's earned, day by day, decision by decision, under pressure, in silence, and without applause. The room went still. I knew that I wasn't just telling a story, I was holding up a mirror. The next quarter, Orex Partners hit full profitability within 6 months. Investors took notice. Clients doubled. Our internal performance shattered every metric we'd set. But the moment that stayed with me happened one quiet evening. I walked into the lounge and saw Jenna and two junior analysts standing at a whiteboard, animated in discussion. They didn't notice me. One of them said, "I've never been at a company where your ideas matter more than your title." That's when I knew it had all been worth it. Not the revenge, the rewriting. The company that let me go was shrinking, holding onto a name while sending out lukewarm emails to lure back burned-out talent. 6 months after its unraveling, they quietly sold off their regional division. No press, just a vague internal memo thanking partners. But I had already seen the acquisition documents. One of my firms bought it. I never set out to buy their leftovers, but it made sense. And it allowed me to offer positions to 47 displaced employees, people I had trained, mentored, and advocated for. The restructuring was handled under another name. They didn't need to know it was me. It was never about being seen anymore. It was about building something that favoritism, nepotism, or a fickle board could never erase. Still, I'd be lying if I said the past didn't linger. Sometimes, late at night, in the still hum of the office, I'd catch myself staring out the window, wondering, what if they had chosen differently? What if Martin had said, "You earned this"? If the board had recognized that the reason things ran so smoothly was because I made it so. But then I'd remember, I didn't succeed because of them. I succeeded despite them. And that truth became my compass. One afternoon, Jenna entered my office holding a box. "This just came for you." No sender, just your name. Inside was a watch. My 10-year anniversary watch from the company. I had left it behind when I packed my things. Folded beneath it was a note, "You were right. We all knew it. I hope you found peace in what you've built." Some of us are still learning how. No name, but I recognized the handwriting. A junior VP who had once looked at me with silent respect, too afraid to speak up. I didn't keep the watch. I placed it in our archive room, in a drawer labeled History. That chapter was closed. By quarter's end, Orex was listed among the fastest-growing strategy firms in the industry. Our name came up on panels, in investor decks, even in competitor briefings. Then came the invitation to speak at the same summit I had once attended from the back row while Martin delivered his keynote on family leadership. This time, I wasn't in the audience. I was the closer. The night before, I couldn't sleep, not from nerves, but because I felt ready. This wasn't a revenge speech. It was a reality check. I stepped onto that stage. The lights felt warmer. The crowd familiar, executives, strategists, analysts with notepads. I looked out and said, 16 months ago, I was denied a promotion after 13 years, not because I wasn't ready, but because the seat was promised to someone who hadn't earned it. They told me, it's just business. So I made a business decision too. I walked, and took 77% of their revenue with me. The silence crackled. But this isn't a story of vengeance. It's vision. It's about what happens when systems forget who built them, and what happens when the overlooked stop asking for permission to lead. Applause erupted. But what struck me more were the faces, some who had lived what I lived, others realizing they had created what I lived. At the closing reception, a man introduced himself, a strategy lead at one of the legacy firms. "You made a lot of people rethink their structures tonight," he said. "I hope so," I replied. Then he asked, "Would you ever return to that world?" I looked him squarely in the eye. "I never left the work," I said. "I just stopped doing it for people who didn't see me." Back in my hotel room, I scribbled something in my journal. Power built in silence is harder to shake than power handed by favor. It became our unofficial motto. Jenna had it engraved on a plaque by the leadership suite a week later. The original company still exists, but as a shadow. A name, barely relevant. They rebranded, replaced board members, distanced themselves from their past. But people remember. And inside our walls, we never forgot what mattered. Here, merit wins. 18 months after they passed me over, I walked into a boardroom I had built, not inherited, not granted, constructed through steady hands, quiet choices, and a team I believed in. The sunlight lit the room. A white table held 12 seats, each occupied by someone with a story like mine. Overlooked. Undervalued. Never irrelevant. I sat at the head, not with ego, but with clarity. Let's begin, I said. That was the real ending. Not their collapse. Not the desperate phone calls. Not even the unraveling of a CEO's illusion. The real ending was what came after. A foundation of integrity. A mission driven by purpose. A legacy not carved in marble, but shaped daily by the people who lived it. We just signed a joint venture with an international logistics firm. One that had once said we were too new. Now, they wanted in. As we wrapped the agreement, our head of operations said, "This puts us at the top." No, I smiled. Our people did that. The deal just made it louder. I still heard whispers about my old firm, more downsizing, more resignations. Margot had exited. The board was scrambling. They were surviving. I didn't feel anger. I didn't want revenge. I simply didn't need them. Then, a private message appeared. No name, just a line. "You were always right. I'm sorry we didn't listen when it mattered." I didn't reply. Some things don't need responses. They need change. That was the difference. They spent years protecting names. I spent months building something that would outlast mine. 1 year after our launch, we hosted our first Oryx assembly, a gathering where no title sat above another, where every voice mattered. I watched as analysts debated with directors, developers showcased prototypes to investors. Jenna came over with a tea in hand. "You know what still amazes me," she said. "That this all began because someone said no." I nodded. She smiled. "But we said yes." She was right. It wasn't about what they took. It was about what I chose to believe after. That I was enough. That I could lead. That I didn't need permission to build something extraordinary. So when people ask me now what I do, I tell them, I don't just run a company. I run a standard. And it's one they'll never forget.